Listen when they talk.
Greetings and salutations. Our modern technological democratic society is filled with choice. Unfortunately, that choice is most often extremely limited. A or B, left or right, Republican or Democrat. In the world of manufactured choice, the establishment looks askance at anything that might disrupt our minds out of their delusional trance. Enter Ron Paul and Jesse Ventura, two figures who built their political careers around dangerously challenging the political status quo that is causing a torpor of mind and morals in our great nation. Well, today we bring you interviews we conducted earlier this year with Jesse and Ron, because holiday season or not, we must never rest, and we must always be watching the Hawks.
Want to know what's going on in your city, in your streets. Never back down like Tyrell, and the truth is what you seek. To analyze, investigate from the bottom to the top. You speak your mind like Sean Stone, whether they like it or not. I got Tabitha, Miss Wallace, with the wisdom and the pearl. Between the outrage and the evidence, what's going on in this world. Watching the Hawks, watching the Hawks, watching the Hawks. Listen when they talk.
Welcome, everybody, to Watching the Hawks. I am Tyrell Ventura.
And I am Tabitha Wallace. And here's one of our favorite interviews from this year, Dr. Ron Paul.
Our next guest served in the House of Representatives on 3 separate occasions and is one of the most influential libertarian thinkers alive today. He has been both lauded and jeered for his views on everything from the war on terror to the Federal Reserve, and amassed a huge following by running for president in 2008 and 2012. Former Texas Congressman Ron Paul joined us earlier today to weigh in on some of the most pressing issues facing the American people today. And we started by asking him whether the recent White House announcement that a U.S. counterterrorism operation accidentally killed 2 hostages in Pakistan was reason enough to shut down the drone program entirely.
It should have been shut down a long time ago, like it should have never been started as far as I'm concerned, unless it was the very, very special conditions which do not exist, because it gives us nothing but grief. They've been used for assassination of American citizens. And this last episode that you referred to, actually, the killing of the American citizens, that might have been the main reason why they sent that drone in there in the first place. So, yes, it should be closed down as quickly as possible. And if it's ever to be used in wartime, it should be very strictly controlled.
Couldn't agree more.
Of course, the White House has argued that if we don't use drones, then we would have to send in ground troops to these precarious areas, which would lead to even more American and civilian casualties. What do you make of the way that the counterterrorism debate has been framed by the establishment?
Well, you know, that's always their argument, you know, whether it's sanctions or drones or whatever, that it will prevent, you know, problems later on. But it usually leads to more. You know, we get involved in their elections. We send in foreign aid. We have special forces going in. We put on sanctions. Now we use drones, as if that won't incite anger. And then there's always mistakes. Civilians are killed. And the anger toward us is every bit as bad, if not worse, by doing this, because it looks like, well, we're shooting and killing people from 30,000 feet. We won't even come down and face the music. But I think it's just a terrible thing. And this idea of saving anything is absolutely wrong, because it almost inevitably escalates. So this is routine. The world knows about this, and this is also the reason why we're on the defensive when it comes to our reputation around the world.
You know, let's move on to that very illustrious Patriot Act, and specifically Section 215, which authorizes the bulk collection of Americans' phone records and is set to expire on June 1st. Republican Senator Tom Cotton has said that this program helps close the gap that contributed to our failure to stop 9/11. You know, I got to know, how do you respond to that argument?
Well, he's blowing smoke, and it's not true. They haven't proved the darn thing, and he's an authoritarian, and anything that would enhance the power of the state, he's for. And Corker right now is sort of supporting him. Corker says that we need a lot more surveillance of the American people, that we haven't done enough. So the two would be together. The leadership of both parties seem to enjoy this. It's going to probably sail through the House. Hopefully it could be stopped in the Senate with a filibuster. But I just think this whole idea that any good has come from it is absolutely wrong, because the one thing that we have military force Congress and a government, the sole purpose is to protect our liberties. Well, how are our liberties being protected if we undermine and destroy our liberties in the pretense that we're chasing an enemy? We get involved in these conflicts because we're too involved anyway, and we're in their countries and bombing them and putting on these sanctions, and all of a sudden they say, well, we have to do it or it would be much worse. Well, that is the cause, and it comes back to haunt us. And what happens to us here at home? We lose our liberties here at home. At the same time, it's costing us a bundle, driving us into bankruptcy, and our freedoms are being undermined. So we're told that we're over there to protect our liberties and enforce the Constitution by fighting unconstitutional wars overseas and by unconstitutionally undermining our Fourth Amendment here at home. It makes no sense. I just wish the American people would wake up.
Well, it's interesting, that balance between, what's public and what's private and what the private sector can handle and what, government can handle. To me, it's always interesting when you get into something with like environmental regulation, and I know that you've said it should be handled by the market. And now the question I ask you is, this has always kind of bothered me a little bit, is what incentive would corporations have to not pollute if it's more profitable? It's hard enough to get these guys to follow the rules when it comes to banking. Can the market correct itself when it comes to that, even though it could be more profitable to pollute?
Yeah, well, imperfectly, but a lot better than the EPA. I was raised in the city of Pittsburgh. It was a horrible, horrible, filthy city, and it was cleaned up before the EPA because we had steel mills and coal smoke-filled skies. It was worse. The sewers were in the river, but it was all cleaned up before the EPA. So there's nothing that's unconstitutional about cities having ordinances that you can't put your sewer in the streets or in our rivers. Private property is very, very strict on environment protection. You have no right to do it. And the incentive would be is a businessman would be held accountable and be put out of business. But for the most part, I believe very sincerely that profits are a big, big motivation, but profits are best gained in a free market when they take care of their workers, when there are safe conditions, and when they're not being sued by polluting their neighbor's property. I happen to live in an area right now which is saturated with Dow Chemical and other chemical companies around us. And I know there's a lot of federal regulations, but quite frankly, I think they would do quite well out of their own self-interest to take care of their neighbor's property, because they're always, concerned about that, and they're community-oriented people who donate and build schools and donate to colleges and all. So there's no reason in the world why they wouldn't have the same incentive. It's when the bureaucrats get involved and the feds come in with guns and the wrong thing happens. When that happens, the businessman tends to want to hide everything, because if he gets caught violating anything, he might get fined or go to prison. Where in a free market, it's the insurance companies would protect you against liability as well as accidents and all things. So the more open you are, so that the insurance companies know how safe you are and how well you're running your business, the less you pay for your insurance. So there's a tremendous incentive in the marketplace to do so.
What do you make of the fact that the American people might once again be facing a Bush-Clinton election in 2016?
If that comes up, the American people are gluttons, and they're going to have to suffer. But, you got to, as bad as it is, because the people get what they sort of ask for, or they're complacent and they don't pay attention to. But then you have to realize that there's a lot of big money behind this, whole process of the Bush family and the Clinton family being the mainstays in our political system. So there are a lot of obstacles, but ultimately, the type of government we have depends on the people's attitudes. Even that is true in a communist system. When the people reject totally confidence in a government and they know the promises aren't going to bear out, they change the program. And so some of these systems fail because they're not workable. And I think that's what we're facing right now. I think the Keynesian welfare model doesn't work, as well as our interventionist foreign policy. It doesn't work, and that's why it's going to fail. But so the American people have a responsibility, but I hope they're not gluttons for more of this suffering.
Yeah, I'm a little tired of that, of the two-name dynasty we've kind of had in this country when it comes to politics. You know, I saw running for governor firsthand through, you know, my father's run for Minnesota governor. And I'm curious, now you've ran for president twice, and I'm wondering if you could kind of pull back that curtain for our viewers and how difficult that process is of just the act of running for president.
Well, personally, it's very trying because there's a lot of travel, and the biggest obstacle, though, is the media. I mean, there were times when we were doing exceptionally well, but we were really in the main stream, you know, of the candidates in the first election in '08. And the first debate in one of the first elections would have been in New Hampshire, run by Fox. So here I am, really right up with you know, in leadership there and playing. So the night before or so, they canceled me. I said I couldn't be in the debates. So it's that kind of stuff. It's the control of the media that is so bad, and the moneyed interests are a big deal. But, you know, what drove me was the fact that there was an audience out there, and there's an audience out there for what we're talking about today, and they unfortunately don't have many places to go to hear the message. But I am convinced that especially the younger generation is sick and tired of what they have. They don't like our foreign policy. They know the welfare state isn't going to work. These deficits won't last. They want their personal liberties back, and I think they are awakening to this, and I think that's what I tapped into and still do when I go to the college campuses, because I still meet a lot of young people this way. And they say, well, is that the majority? Not necessarily, but just remember, you need about 5 to 10% of the people in leadership positions who believe in something. And believe me, there is going to be a vacuum out there when this thing comes down on our heads, and people have to admit, you know, we have to have something different. Are we going to go to a totalitarian system, or are we going to say, well, maybe we were on the right track 100 years ago before we rejected the idea of freedom being an answer? So it's up for grabs, but in many ways I'm optimistic that the young people are responding in a very favorable manner.
Very good.
I have to agree. I think that we're going to see a big surprise in 2016 from millennials, because they're, as we've talked about on this show, they're a big part of the job market, they're the future, and they're so much better informed than they have been. Thank you so much, Dr. Ron Paul, host of the Liberty Report. Thank you for joining us here in the Hawk's Nest.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
As we go to break, Hawk Watchers, don't forget to let us know what you think of the topics we've covered on our Facebook and Twitter pages, and check out our full shows at RT.com. And for exclusive behind-the-scenes Hawks coverage, download the RT plug-in app available on iTunes and Google Play. Coming up, former Governor Jesse Ventura, my dad, enters the Hawk's Nest. So stay tuned to Watching the Hawks.
Here's what people have been saying about Redacted tonight.
Give it to us.
Redacted is full-on awesome.
So
good. The only show I go out of my way to watch every week. It really packs a punch. Lee Camp is the John Oliver of RT America.
You guys do have the same accent.
Hey, we are apparently better than boobs.
Nothing's better than boobs.
You see, people you've never heard of love Redacted tonight. The president of the World Bank, though, hates it.
Yeah, well, he doesn't really have any taste.
Seriously, he sent us an email.
Not many people can say they've been a Navy SEAL, a professional wrestler, a movie star, an author, a city mayor, a state governor, and Tyrell's dad. In fact, we checked. And we're pretty sure that unless Tyrell isn't telling us something, there's only one person in the world who's checked all those boxes. And that's our next guest, Jesse Ventura. Jesse shocked the establishment back in 1998 by running as a third-party candidate in the Minnesota gubernatorial race, beating both the Democratic and Republican candidates, and served for one term as governor of the state. Today, Jesse hosts a political commentary show called Off the Grid, which you can see right here every Friday on RT. So to discuss everything from police brutality to poaching wild animals, Jesse joins us now from Minneapolis.
It's great to have you on, Jesse. Great to have you on. Jesse, Dad, I guess.
Well, nice to be here. As you said, I'm in Minneapolis, so technically I'm not off the grid right now, but in a matter of a couple months, I will be down and be off the grid again.
Where even I don't know where to find you. I want to start by getting your thoughts on the latest police killing in Cincinnati involving the 43-year-old Samuel DuBose. This case is particularly tragic because the officer was indeed wearing a body camera. And on one hand, you can argue that it's great that he was wearing the camera because we have video evidence now. But on the other hand, the fact that the officer was wearing the body camera didn't seem to stop him from committing the crime. Do you think that this means that body cameras aren't the be-all, end-all to finding a solution to police brutality?
Well, there is no be-all, end-all that can solve it because ultimately it comes down to the individual, doesn't it? Just like when someone chooses to use a firearm and shoot someone in any capacity, it isn't the gun that does it. It's the person that squeezes the trigger and makes that decision to act that way. We need to reassess naturally our position here on our law enforcement, but you know, the more and more in this country that you see military involvement and military on the streets of the United States, and you look at our law enforcement people today, and for the most part, many of the times they look like SWAT teams, military teams, and all that stuff. And it's very disturbing to me. I mean, are we going to be a society? I mean, I've never owned a cell phone, and I never will. I want to be able to put on my grave, he never owned a cell phone. But are we all going to have to get, what, cameras on top of our heads? And everybody in the entire United States is going to walk around filming everything they do? Is that what's in store for us in this new century ahead? If it is, I'm glad I'm 64.
Yeah, it does get to that. Well, when you were governor, how did you handle issues of police brutality in Minnesota? And why do you think so many presidential politicians, both on the Democratic and Republican side, have refused to acknowledge that this problem is, in fact, disproportionately impacting minority communities, African Americans and Native Americans specifically?
Well, you have a difficult situation here because you have all the different levels of government. And it's not the governor's job necessarily to step into local law enforcement. You have mayors, you have council people at those levels. Then you have county policing. So you've got city and town policing. Then you've got county policing. And I, as a governor, truly, my police force are the Minnesota State Troopers. I'm not technically in charge of all of these other law enforcement agencies. They fall unto their own. So I don't know what the answer is. Do we consolidate? Do we go to state policing? Do we go to regionalized policing and be able to educate better at that level rather than having federal, state, county, and local? There could be arguments either way on it. I've always maintained here in Minnesota, why is it that we need local policing? Let's go to the county level and county police, because that way it'll save us a tremendous amount of money, paperwork, and duplication. So there's arguments either way on that issue, but it's difficult to just blame the person at the top of government, because the person at the top of government may not be at all directly in charge with what's happening at a local level.
I want to switch now over to presidential politics. And according to The Hill, the total cost of the 2016 presidential election could hit upwards of $5 billion at this point. Is it even still possible to stem the tide of big money in politics?
I don't know, but I'd like to see some new laws passed. How about a law that you can't even start campaigning or do anything until the year of the election? I mean, it's so ridiculous now. This election's going to happen in 2016. Does that mean the 2020 elections start in 2017? Is that what we're facing now in our country? Why not keep it to at least the year the election is going to happen? That way you save a tremendous amount of money being spent on these elections. And if they go to that level of spending to buy a political office, I sit back and laugh and think in 1998, I only raised $300,000 to become the governor of Minnesota. I actually made more money doing the job than what I spent to get it. And elections shouldn't be about money. They should be about ideas. And ideas don't cost money. All they cost is you thinking a little bit.
That's a great point.
Yeah. And of course, we're in a situation now where we have pretty much two choices. And as you've pointed out, you know, what did we fight a Revolutionary War for if we're just going to go back to this sort of, you know, oh, well, there's two families and they run everything, and that's how we do. Well, Jesse, I have to get your thoughts on a story that's been all over social media the last couple of days. By now, most people have heard of the killing of one of Zimbabwe's most prized national symbols, Cecil the lion. What was your reaction when you found out that Cecil's killer was a dentist from your own state?
Well, it didn't matter who he was or where he was from. It's the big picture of killing animals for trophies. Haven't we evolved beyond that at this point in time? That you would go out and you would murder an animal, an exotic, be it a lion, a tiger, a rhino, whatever it may be, to put their head up on the wall? And I mean, I can understand if you need to survive for food. I can understand personal survival, but I, for the life of me, do not understand sport killing. And human beings are the only ones that I know that practice it. The animal world doesn't kill for sport. They don't kill for fun. But we're the only species that goes out and kills for fun. And the fact that this lion even had a GPS device around its neck, I've got a good idea. They've got these big sanctuaries, right, where these lions and tigers live. Before they can get a license to hunt them, I think the hunters should have to go through the sanctuary naked, carrying raw meat, and have no weapons on them forever. And if they survive, then give them their license. Give the animals a fair crack at the humans. Make it even. Make the playing field level.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I grew up in the country. I grew up around a lot of hunting, but but there's this huge difference. You know, we went out hunting, or my family went out hunting, and you got a deer for a reason, because you filled a freezer full of food, and it helped you live through the rest of the, you know, it helped feed your family. There's a reason we make gloves out of things. There's an understanding and a respect for what you're getting and using all of it. And this was so just wasteful.
It reminds me of my good friend Dabney Coleman when he played Franklin Hart in 9 to 5.
Yeah.
We all remember that character, and he had all the dead animals on the wall, and that's how, in fact, one of the dreams to take him out by Jane Fonda dealt exactly with that.
Exactly.
But getting back to it on a serious note, sport hunting should be banned throughout the world. Wow. There is no reason for sport hunting.
Oof. Yeah. Oof. I have to agree. Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left, Governor, but I wanted to bring up something that's close to your heart. I wanted to bring up how the New York Times, the Washington Post, the American Society of News Editors, NPR, Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, and even in the Minnesota Newspaper Association had all signed these amicus briefs regarding your defamation suit, arguing that they're concerned with the negative impact on media organizations for what they called unjustified and potentially crippling awards. And what they did specifically say, they didn't say you weren't supposed to get anything. They state that they feel you had a legal right to the award for defamation. They have a problem with the unjust enrichment. And we got about a minute left. How do you respond to that?
I responded by this. How can they sit back and think they should be able to make profit violating the law? They defame someone and they should be able to profit from that defamation? mainstream media, they're going to turn this, they're already entertainment. They're going to turn defamation into a profit-making business. It's just like when Howard Stern did regular radio, he'd get fined $10,000 by the FCC. There's your defamation, but the station would make $100,000, so they'd gladly pay the 10 to make 90. That's what these mainstream media people want. They want free will to defame anybody and turn it into the business of profiting from that defamation, and they want our laws to give them the right to profit from wrongdoing. That in itself is wrong, and you notice that mainstream media, the New York Times, all these conglomerates won't talk about this case. My case, the jury found overwhelming evidence that the book profited by the defamation of Jesse Ventura. The federal judge agreed in a 24-page report. The jury agreed, and now mainstream media has stuck its nose in because they want to make profiting by defaming people a business, a profitable business that they will then do all the time. None of us will be safe, nobody, if the media can profit by defamation.
Right. And I have to agree, because I think that was the thing about it, that you had this you know, all of this in these amicus briefs. They didn't say that you weren't defamed. They did say that was wrong. They just don't want to be responsible for it. And that's disgusting. It's disrespectful to everybody in the media.
Let me interject here. Every case should be held on its own merits. Let a jury and a judge decide each case, not do some blanket thing that allows the media to profit from wrongdoing, which is what mainstream media is asking the courts to allow them to do. Profit from their wrongdoing. They're wrong, but they get to profit from it, and the person they wrong doesn't get anything from it.
That's pretty incredible, Jesse. It's always great to talk to you. I always love talking to you here on the show. And I got to ask you one quick question at the very, very end. And I have to ask it.
What?
Are we going to run for president?
I don't know. I'm going to wait till next year when all the pikers get out. Get rid of the pikers, get it down to 2 people, and then I'll come in and we'll have a legitimate 3-way race. But I'm not going to enter this fray now. What a waste of money and time.
Oh, exactly.
Totally.
But you are throwing a little bit of support to Bernie Sanders.
I'll tell you this. I've never been a one-issue person, but in 2016, I am going to be a one-issue voter. And that issue is no more war in the Middle East. I want out of there, and there's only 2 candidates that have promised that. That's Bernie Sanders and Rand Paul. I'm leaning to Bernie Sanders right now. Go, Bernie. Get us out of the Middle East once and for all.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dad. And that is our show for you today. And remember, everyone, in this world, we are not told we are loved enough. So I tell you all, I love you. I am Tyrell Ventura.
And I am Tabitha Wallace.
Keep on watching the Hawks and have a great night, everybody.